Good afternoon, everybody. This afternoon's proceedings, like this morning's, are being transmitted on the live link, but after a 15-minute delay, those with mobile devices may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 15 minutes have elapsed since the event that they're reporting. They may not be used for recording or photography. Yes.
Mr. Dell, we were looking at the Tradecraft Manual, and we'll stick with that for the moment. You say at page 83, paragraph 132 of your witness statement, that when reading it now in preparation for this hearing, the tone of the Tradecraft Manual is flippant and inappropriate when it comes to various issues. In terms of the practice of creating cover identities using deceived children's identities in the Tradecraft Manual, given that the practice was no longer used by the time you became manager, what do you say about the fact that that Tradecraft Manual was still in place and it left instructions for UCOs under your watch to use that sort of practice? And I'm thinking in particular in relation to HN16, who created his own separate identity in the name of Kevin Crossland.
He didn't need any help, did he? He'd made the identity for Kevin Crossland before he went on the SDS, as I think it was the case. It's an inexcusable practice. I don't think, again, it speaks to the fact of the status of the Tradecraft Manual, that no one did actually use that as a justification for getting an alternative identity, other than the miscreants such as Thompson, which is just another way out for him, isn't it?
There was no attempt, even though the Tradecraft Manual was being used as a training tool, there was no attempt then to update it.
No, it was in the garage.
Apart from it kept being brought out of the garage to be read by every new recruit.
Allegedly.
Most of the UCOs that we've heard from refer to the Tradecraft Manual, and in particular relying upon the material that was set out in Section 5 in relation to sexual liaisons.
Well, again, they would, wouldn't they?
Are you saying that the training programme as it was set out wasn't actually being followed by the new recruits?
It wasn't
in that they weren't reading the Tradecraft Manual?
Well, it wasn't a training manual, and had I known its contents, it wouldn't have been part of the training schedule. And again, I can just say, big mistake, no excuses.
On reflection, looking at the deceived child identity section in particular, do you accept now that the flippant and derogatory references to deceased children and their families in the manual could have given the UCOs the impression that deceased children and their families were not to be afforded much importance or value?
That is certainly the impression that's conveyed, yeah.
Can I take you to the closing report, which was authored on the 25th of June 2009. It wasn't in your bundle, it's behind MPS 0722622. It was the report that was commissioned at the end of the life of the SDS. The first page you can see that it was authored by DS HN273. And page 12, please. Sorry, page 13, internal page 12. No, it's not that. It's perhaps the next page. Can we go on to page 10, please? It might be that. No, it's not. I'm sorry, it's none of those pages at all. I'm looking for the 12-week training programme that was set out for UCOs in the back office. It may be that it's... I'll come back to that document then. Can we have on screen, please? In fact, let me ask you about this. You say in your witness statement, paragraph 131, that indeed at the time you were concerned by the fact that there was no formal training course for new UCOs. And there was suggestion that the nature of the work lent itself more to practical than theoretical training, and you've raised that already in your evidence this morning. In terms of what a training course could have consisted of, we know that HN67 went and viewed the new TAC programme.
Yes.
And he said there that the key parts of the programme which would have transferred over to the SDS would have been the legal framework.
Yes.
And of course, by the time that you step into the management role, we've got the Human Rights Act of 1998 that's come into force and RIPA of 2000. In terms of legal framework and principles that could have applied to your officers, is it right that training on matters such as Article 8, the right to privacy, Articles 10 and 11 that you've mentioned already, rights to assembly and freedom of expression, Article 3, the freedom from inhuman and degrading treatment and punishment, and non-discrimination principles, particularly in regard to race and sex, those would all have been key areas of training for your UCOs, given the nature of the deployments they had. Do you accept that?
Yes, I do.
Do you accept that they should have been trained on those principles and the legal framework around that?
You've just described the training programme that anyone in my position sitting here would devise now. Yes. And you're living through it and you are not picking up all the signals. That's what you actually need to be doing then. So yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Was there no thought given to that at the time?
To a training course on those lines, no.
And why was that, given the principles were so obviously relevant to those operations?
I know what the answer is. I'm just trying not to sound like I'm trying to wheedle out of it. But, I mean, there are certain fundamentals that you expect of special branch officers who are, I thought, detective constable trained, that they would be familiar with these and would be reading them. And that sounds like, oh, it's on the shelf, go and read it. I know it sounds like that, and that's why I agree with you. It should be more formal training. Sit them down and work your way through it. So yes, guilty of assuming that they would take a professional interest. I'm not saying they, I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying all of us. So...
In a similar fashion as well, in terms of RIPA, the principles of necessity, proportionality and lawfulness.
Yes, though that was the daily concerns of we in the office. That was the daily concerns with people. We were in a better position than, say, out on division, where they're handling UCs and informants, as part of a myriad number of other things. All I had to deal with was this. And so it really, you had the chance for real hands-on supervision there. You didn't have any chance in the field, but yes. So it was oral.
What about issues, we've already addressed LPP to some extent.
Say again, sorry.
We've addressed legal professional privilege to some extent.
Yes.
What about issues like trespass, the officers, entering people's own homes, living in people's homes for years at a time?
Yes.
Did that raise any concerns with you in the office?
This was why at the beginning I took a fortnight to decide whether I wanted the job. I could see how the landscape was changing, and it was the SDS didn't sit outside, certainly didn't sit outside the law, but it seemed to sit outside the Met Police, sit alongside it. And society was content for us to do that. Society is now expressing through Parliament that it's not happy with that, and it's passing the legislation. And yes, that very issue of trespass, the normal everyday things which we did. And we didn't change quick enough. And that's me. We didn't change quick enough.
Was there a sense that the officers had this sense that they were no longer part of the police force when they were deployed, that they became the identity that they assumed, and so they weren't bound by any of the normal policing codes of conduct or the laws that would normally apply to a police officer on duty?
I'm not sure about that. And I'm referring to the branch as a whole, not just the SDS. I mean, obviously there was the assumption that if authorised, I can commit crime. And I now realise that were they sure that there was no statutory authority to commit crime? As I say, I used to give the little 45-minute slot on the national course, but for those in place, you do realise that our conduct is scrutinised by the court, so that every time we authorise someone to commit crime, it's not a right, it's just a protocol. And that is tested by the courts every time. That leads into misleading of courts, another reason not to. Apart from the absolute reason, there's a particular reason. Yes, and I made too many assumptions.
Going back to that closing report, I now have the right reference. It's page 22. So it's MPS 0722622, page 22. Thank you. And we can see here that this was seen as the 12-week back.
Did you say page 22?
Page 22, yes. It's actually the...
I've got 21 here.
Yeah,
There's
that's the internal page.
references.
It's the two-page, yeah.
One at the bottom right-hand corner and one
The
internal.
electronic page.
I've only got one page here.
That's all right. It's the electronic page number down at the bottom, not the internal
Oh, I'm sorry.
actual
Yeah, sorry.
report page number.
Yeah.
But this is what I did want to refer you to, the 12-week training programme. And we can see that week one, amongst other things, study the tradecraft manual. It's, what we saw was written up for HN18, but it seems that this was the standard approach to training. So right at the very start, officers were told to study the tradecraft manual. So do you accept it's likely they did do that?
Yeah.
And that when officers are referring to references within the tradecraft manual, it's probably right that they had read them and they were relying on them.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think they're relying on it to give evidence to this inquiry, perhaps.
But it's not just that they've read the training manual or the tradecraft manual since leaving the SDS and now they're making up their story to present it to the inquiry.
Yes. I don't know, because I'd have to speak to every individual officer, which of course you have done.
Page 13, I'm hoping this is the right reference now. Oh, sorry, no, it's page 23. Paragraph 3, we can see that by 2004, so 3 years into your managerial role, the issue of revisiting the training programme was on the agenda again. And this was outlined by a comment within a discussion paper that is set out below. can you see there?
Yeah.
Towards the end, the SDS itself is reviewing its own training methods, a variety of different views on the way forward. What do you recall about addressing the training programme?
I don't recall anything because it was a continuous thing. It was a continuing dissatisfaction with it. And that's not retrospective, it was at the time.
Is it fair to say that despite an intention to review the UCO training programme, no steps were taken to jettison the out-of-date tradecraft manual, or even revise or update it?
That's correct, yeah.
Do you accept then that perpetuated outdated, abusive, offensive operational tactics being used by officers under your watch?
Not necessarily being used, but being promulgated by the tradecraft manual.
Okay. And those offensive and abusive behaviours were actually in practice, weren't they, during your time as manager?
Yes. Well, can I just clarify?
Yeah.
If I'm referring to they and the omissions of people, I can't get out of my mind. I refer to them as the miscreants. It's those I'm talking about. I had an excellent group of people, and I wouldn't want them to be put in the same basket of blame as two particular miscreants during my time. So that I think they exhibited the worst of the behaviour.
And those two, are those open officers?
Yes, Thompson and Saraki.
What about HN18?
Is Rob Hastings.
Rob Hastings, yeah.
Yeah. He deployed not long before I retired. So my view of him is really of the evidence I saw. And yes, of course, that's great disappointment. I'm sure he's disappointed with himself. But
what about HN60? Have you heard that HN60 is alleged to have had and admits to having a sexual relationship in his cover identity?
yes, I heard that about a month ago. And when I inquired, am I allowed to discuss the circumstances of it?
Yes.
I mean, I was reassured that it was a one-off on a training course he had attended with a woman who was not an activist, and it was a short fling. I'm not justifying it, but at first I thought, no, not another one. But this was before I took over the SDS, so it was before I gave the instruction. So I think anything I direct against him would be mitigated by that fact, and I'm not as disappointed as I was initially.
What about HN77? Had you heard anything about her having sexual relationships in her cover identity?
No.
In terms of what you know about people's sexual relationships undercover, have you gained all that knowledge simply through the inquiry,
Yeah.
or have you made your own investigations, or have you inquired
No
with your
investigation. I've had
ex-officers?
no contact with anyone, just the inquiry.
And so to that extent, are you not in a position to be able to tell us whether there were any sexual relationships by the closed officers that you managed? And I want you to be careful
Yes,
in
yeah.
terms of their anonymity.
The only ones I know of are the ones that you have revealed.
Okay. And that's because the inquiry have been able to expose those.
Yes, exactly.
Or, well, not just the inquiry, obviously there's been lots of actions taken by the core
the
participants
activists.
as well
Yes, yeah.
to expose that. Can I ask you, please, about MPS 073 8049? Again, this was not part of your bundle. It's an account of Dr. Palmer, Dr. Ian Palmer, who I think you'll
Yes.
recognise as being the
Oh, yeah.
psychiatrist
Yes.
who was employed by the SDS. What was your relationship like with Dr. Ian Palmer, if you can remember?
Yes, very good. I went to his wedding. I wasn't a friend who socialised with him, but I was well known enough to go to his wedding, yeah.
Page 3, penultimate paragraph, please. We can see his take on the practice of the existing or old officers recommended to choose new officers to lead the officers being picked for recruitment. So again, the practice of old hands, old UCOs coming in, picking the new UCOs, and that potentially being quite a toxic culture. And I think you've addressed that already by saying that can lead to problems. It's better in some respects to bring fresh blood in from outside of the SDS and Special Branch.
I found when I went onto the SDS an officer who I didn't even know was on the SDS, but had been on E Squad with me. And I could have had an input into his selection. But no one consulted me when I was on E Squad.
Page 5, please. Last paragraph. Here he's talking about the sessions that he had with undercover officers and the issues they faced during the course of their deployment. He says, however, the main threat to UCs during this time appeared to be women. This could stem from either entanglement with them or the lack of them in their lives as perceived by the wearies. Some of this stemmed from their lack of understanding of how the female mind worked. It was made clear to all of them by management that relationships were off the cards, and this was reiterated in my sessions, and this led in some way to the introduction of support role players. Can I ask you first, in terms of the main threat to the undercover officers during their time in operation, how was it that were seen to be women? Why were women seen to be the threat?
I don't know, and I wish that Ian had discussed that with me. We had a protocol that relationship between doctor and client was privileged. However, if an item was discussed that Ian felt that I should know, he would agree with the UC that I be told. And if the UC didn't agree to that, then their relationship would end, and similarly the UC would be shown the door. So I'm a bit disappointed that Ian didn't manage to find a way of conveying that to me, that there was a particular problem with women, unless he means the desire for support players. But if he's talking about existing sexual relations, then I really would have wanted to know. I'm not, on second thoughts, I'm not sure he is. I don't know.
Is it fair to say that he didn't raise issues to do with women?
No, when we had this
you?
arrangement, he would write a generic report on the concerns of the field every now and then, which everybody was happy discussing. But with individuals, no.
How is it that he became aware of the introduction of support role players as a practice to mitigate the need for a sexual relationship in the field?
Possibly because of his military links, and that it arranged for support players to be provided by a branch of the military.
I think he's referring specifically, though, to the SDS here.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm referring to. We used the military to provide us with support players in a very, very limited way, unfortunately.
In terms of women being seen to be a main threat to UCOs, is that reflective of a misogynistic attitude that women are the greatest threat?
I read it as him meaning it's the greatest operational threat to them. Now, whether it was or not is another question, but that's what I take it to mean.
And is that because becoming involved with a woman could lead to the woman exposing them and finding out who they really are?
Well, as I say, the overwhelming majority of the people were excellent people, but they expressed that concern of this, you've heard it before, the gap in their legend of the lack of a member of the opposite sex. So I think maybe that's what he's talking about.
And was there a discussion then with Ian Palmer about support role players?
I don't think, well, if there was, I don't remember it. Because he didn't even mention any problems. That was the thing. There were no problems. And that didn't come up, I don't think, in a generic letter. He might have done, but only in the context, not of women being a problem, but of the support role players that we needed.
At page 6, fourth line from the top, we can see that in terms of management, he says initially Mike Dell was not necessarily trusted by the UCs as you had not been an operative. However, I believe that he proved himself time and again.
Sorry, who is this?
This is Ian Palmer. Still,
this is still Ian.
Yeah, this
Sorry.
is his interview. This is his Hearn interview. So he's talking about you not necessarily being trusted at the beginning. Given that at the beginning of your operation, your management, that's when you said you spoke to the officers and told them that sexual relationships were not permitted. Would it be fair to say that they were not going to come to you to discuss that issue?
Yes.
Because they didn't trust you, given that you hadn't been a UCO?
Yes. I couldn't have it both ways. I either give the warning or I didn't. And I chose to give the warning. And it was also part of the fact I was determined that it was not going to be the DI running the operations, it was me.
And did you give any instructions to your DI or your DSs to have conversations with the UCOs to find out what was going on, to ask them directly if they'd had sexual relationships or not?
No, I didn't give them instructions, and this is not a cop-out because they were excellent people themselves. Each of them had served on all the operational squads. You'll see how impressive Steve Beals is when he comes up this week. I was really, really lucky in the sergeants I had.
So is it your evidence that none of the managers actually asked the UCOs directly if they'd have had a sexual relationship?
No, the converse isn't necessarily the truth, just because I didn't tell them. And I've got to add to that HN53 as the excellent DI. So they were good people. And when I say they knew what to do, that's not a cop-out again. I knew they were the type of people who would be addressing this in their everyday work with the UCs.
You thought they were addressing the issue of sexual relationships, or...?
I thought they were addressing all of the issues of concern. And
how did you know that?
I don't know it. I just know from experience of working with all of them, working with each of them on at least one squad each time, maybe two squads with some of them, over a long period. And to send them a memo or something they would have found it strange.
Sorry, do you mean send a memo to your managers?
You must do this, you must do that, don't forget to do this.
What about just a discussion? I understand the workings of the back office, were you all fairly close together in the same room as HM53? Did you share an office?
It would be good to see their statements because I'm quite confident that they will be saying that I made plain what the standards were. So no one was any doubt. They didn't need it written down on a memo and sent to them and asked to promise to comply. They were of the same ilk. They held the same standards.
It's one thing, though, isn't it, saying this is what the rule is, and it's another to actually make any checks, talk with the officers, ask them what's happening in their operational lives.
Yes.
Who was doing that in terms of asking, inquiring about sexual relationships?
Actually, inquiring of sexual relationships, I think the evidence to this inquiry has been instructive. That the council has come with 10 years of script, evidence, corroboration, eyewitness testimony. And they admit to that, do the UCs. But anything you didn't have, no one was admitting to that. When they're into sexual deception, they're deceiving three people, aren't they? The woman herself, their wife, and me. Now, who do you think of all those three is the easiest one to deceive? Their wife, they have to do it every day. The woman, every time they are with them. And they're giving off signals, they're giving off smells that they are a changed person in some way. Me? Have you been a naughty boy, Carlo? No, Mike. Are you sure, Carlo? Oh, you're too good for me, Mike. I put my hands up. It's just not going to work, is it? Their game is deception.
But aren't you in the position, knowing what their home life is and knowing what their operational life is? You're the only person out of that triangle that has a view on both worlds.
I got a view.
So you're in a better position than either woman to understand what's going on in that officer's life, aren't you?
I can interpret a man's mood better than his wife. I can see that he's under stress. I can see that something's troubling him. But I know better than a partner, wife, whatever, that this person is changed, and he still gets away with it. I mean, he just puts a front on when he sees me. That's why I had to give a warning, and that's why I had to give it as a one-shot go. Because I know that once I've given the warning, I've put them on their guard. No one was going to come and confess to me after that. Which is why I was so surprised when Carlos Saraki did, 2, 3, 4 days later. But of course, he was just covering. He was setting his story. She's not an activist, etc. Because he didn't know that we weren't inquiring into him. But no one else would have come and confessed unless it was in their best interest to do so.
When you say he was covering, what do you mean he was covering?
Well, he didn't know whether we were investigating him as well as Thompson. And so he thought, I'll get my defence in first. This woman who you've discovered, Mike, and I hadn't, she's not an activist. I'm very sorry. The relationship's ending. My marriage is all over the place. I went away and thought about it, and I came back and I said, right, it has to end now. Then you can stay on the unit. And that would the only exception I would have made. It was because he had come to me straight away and admitted, but he hadn't, of course. He was just giving me a story.
What was the difference between having a relationship with an activist and a non-activist?
None, except that his relationship was before I'd given the warning. Had it been with an activist, then he would have gone. And that's why I thought about it before I decided.
Just inquiring about that distinction you make between an activist or a non-activist.
Yes.
Why draw that distinction? Because both women were being deceived, both women being in a relationship with a person that effectively doesn't exist,
Yes.
a creation of the Met Police. Both women in a relationship with somebody who is facilitated by the back office in that they're given an identity, given a cover home, cover employment, and they're effectively on duty in their undercover identity. How is it different just because one is an activist and one isn't an activist?
Just like a travelling salesman, where the company provides him with the company car and the hotel and the expense account, facilitating in that sense.
Yeah.
He'd had a relationship, which he said was finishing, with someone with whom, had she discovered he was an undercover policeman, could have decided whether she liked that or not. But it was not an integral part of their relationship that he was not seeing he was a undercover police officer. With the activist woman, he has got to deceive her on that front. The relationship with a non-activist woman is just, well, normal deception. I'm not married, I don't have kids, and etc. So
But it's not normal deception, is it? He's not, for instance, Carlo Soracchi is not seeing Lindsay as Carlo Soracchi, police officer.
No.
Outside of his working time. He's seeing Lindsay as Carlo Neri, activist, being paid for trips abroad with her.
Sorry, but I'm told she's not an activist. And that is the point. So that his other life as a police officer doesn't impinge on that relationship in any way. If she discovers it, she might say, oh, if you'd been a fireman, I would have been happy, but you're not. It's irrelevant as that. Whereas if an activist had discovered it, well, then it's a wholly different ball game.
Why is that? Why so different?
Because she's not given informed consent. She, as an activist, is much more likely to not want to have sexual relationships with a police officer. And she has been deceived on that level. And she's been deprived of agency. She's no informed consent. And you lawyers will know about the debate. Does that fringe into rape? Whereas with another woman, it's just like, to me, a lorry driver who has two families at ends of the country. His firm facilitates it. There's a third party, and that's his wife.
Before we move on to the third party, though, HN18, we know, had a relationship with Maya, not an activist, but lived next door to an activist.
Yes.
Are you saying that deception of Maya by HN18 was not as deceitful or not as bad in some way because she might have not been so hurt by the fact he was an undercover officer than somebody who perhaps was a part of the ISM, the group that HN18 infiltrated?
I think there is a difference. It might or might not be the case that any deceived woman, when they discover the true identity of the bloke who they think is somebody else, who claims to be a sales rep but in fact is a lorry driver, or whatever. I think it's a bit different in this case, where the misconduct is egregious. I mean, I've just gone through all the lack of agency, etc. I think there is a difference. Now, does that mean I would have continued to make that distinction after I'd given the directive? No. Because the third party is the one I have a duty of care to, and that's his partner, wife, whatever. And that however less guilty the relationship is between the two of you, I'm not being party to a deception of your partner, wife. And so I wouldn't have made the distinction after I'd given the instruction. But his conduct predated it. And that's what I meant about he was getting his defence in quick. come straight to me and clear the slate. They're just a pack of lies, but now I now know.
Did you see yourself as having a duty of care to members of the public as well? To protect them from the deceit as well as the spouse or partner?
So in relation again to Carlo, no. No more than if one of my sergeants was having an affair with someone. It's none of my business.
It's not if it's the personal life, and I think we would accept that at the inquiry, but this isn't Carlo Saraki's personal life when he's having a relationship with Lindsay, is it? It's his operational life.
No, it's not.
He's having a relationship as Carlo Neri.
Not as he's presented it to me. He's presented it to me as being completely outside his operation. Now, he's got to use the same name, Carlo Neri, for obvious reasons. But it's outside his operation. And I repeat, though, it wouldn't have made a distinction after that, but for different reasons. Duty of care to the wife. But in that particular, this is the starting point of the regime, if you like. Okay, well, that's it now. Slate cleaned.
Would you have seen yourself as having a duty of care to an activist? So to a woman who was in part of the target group?
Of course.
To protect her?
When I gave the warning, I thought carefully about how I should word it, because it was a one-shot. And I thought of the three groups who would be deceived. It would be a waste of time mentioning the deception of the activist, because simply, if you are in such a relationship, you've obviously ignored the activist's feelings and sentiments. So it's no good going on that line. And it's a one-shot shock tactic. And so I went in on duty of care to the wife, and then also my duty of care to you, to keep you out of trouble in terms of discipline charges, maybe even criminal charges, in your relationship with the activist. But I didn't mention the activist for very specific reasons. Well, you've discounted that already, so it won't appeal to you. It won't appeal to your good nature, because you knew it was wrong and you just went ahead anyway.
Did you ever couch the relationship with an activist in terms of it being abuse?
Yes.
Of it being perceived as rape?
Yes.
Gross misconduct?
Yes.
And what was the response to that? What did people say?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I overtly couch it? No, I'm sorry.
Did you make it?
Your words are precise. My understanding's not. No, I didn't mention it in those terms, but I did allude to it in saying my duty of care to you, to keep you out of trouble. Now, I'm assuming, again, they're bright enough to know what that means. Most police officers have had something. If you haven't had any complaints made against you, then you're not doing your job. They've all come across those sorts of situations where they've honestly gone about their job and come a cropper. So I didn't labour that, no.
Do you think it might have helped, in hindsight
Yes.
now, looking back,
Yeah.
to spell it out
Yes.
to your UCOs that this is abuse, this is misogynistic behaviour?
In
Don't
retrospect,
do it
yes.
for that reason.
Yes, sit down, get your pens out, write this down. Yes, but I'm speaking to adults, most of whom were excellent.
Would it have helped you had such a behaviour been seen as a specific criminal offence?
It would certainly have backed up the threat.
And would that be a greater disincentive to any officer rather than a duty of care to their spouse, which they've already written off anyway, haven't they, by having that
I don't
relationship
know.
undercover?
I can see the case for it, but then being, I suppose the dishonesty towards their wife is something they kept pushing away and fighting. But that really might be the way in. That's where you can really get them to think, because they're pushing it away because they know this isn't the right thing to do. Whereas the activist, they're abusing them. So it's no good appealing to the sentiment on that.
Do you think that perhaps some of the UCOs who hadn't yet entered into a sexual relationship might have thought twice about it if they did understand that in terms of abuse and perceived as rape?
No, I can't speak for individuals, but in general terms, I was appealing to self-interest. And I think if they had not been involved in it, they were more likely to not want to harm and abuse their wives. And they hadn't done so far. And so I was reinforcing that. Well, would I, on reflection, next time, spell it all out? Yes, I'll try to cover all bases as possible. I'm just explaining the reasoning behind my actions at the time.
Can I have on screen, please? Well, it's your witness statement, page 54 to 55. It's paragraph 81. And this is where you address the scenario that was given in training sessions or in recruitment sessions.
Yeah.
To establish whether somebody was the right sort of person to be recruited to the SDS. And it's the scenario that addresses this. A weary invites herself in for coffee after sharing a cab home, and it becomes obvious that she has no intention of leaving before the morning. Do you remember using that scenario in recruitment exercises?
Yeah.
In terms of whether that was a realistic assessment of the risk, do you now accept that, in fact, what was happening in reality is that it was the officers who were approaching women and pursuing women for sex?
Yes, I don't buy the mermaid thing.
In terms of the scenarios that you used in recruitment, and obviously being careful as to how many people you recruited and the names of those individuals, but what discussion did this scenario provoke?
I can't remember. No.
During these sorts of scenarios, did you reiterate then that sex was prohibited?
I can't remember. I don't know.
Would it have been the right time to reiterate then?
No,
that sex
I was
was
listening to
prohibited?
them. I wanted to know about them.
And on a debrief after such an interview, would you do that?
No. I wasn't setting out to put them on the right path for their future life. I was just trying to select them, and I wanted to hear what they had to say.
In terms of your understanding that this was a risk, that you'd identified the risk, what measures did you put in place, other than your directive to the plenary session? What other measures did you put in place to prevent such relationships from occurring?
It was impossible to put any in place, other than the great benefit we had of dealing with this all the time and seeing them quite frequently, and making the best of that, trying to judge differences in behaviour, rationalisations for their conduct over the weekend, what they've been doing and why. It wasn't a mission, it was like, how the heck can I do any more? And that was what's deeply unsatisfactory. And again, when I spent a fortnight thinking, did I want the job? These was one of the things that, and why I wanted to control the operations myself, not the DI. It was going to be so difficult to make sure that the standards were applied. And that's not ducking out, that's just a recognition of the reality. But could I think of any way of keeping a tab on that? No.
I've already asked you this, but what about just straight up conversations with the officers about ways to go about avoiding sexual relationships?
Well, yes. I mean, that was discussed in the terms of support role officers. And the other excellent people, where they were facing the same problems in some of their fields, but that was, you could fix it, but with a support group player, making just cameo appearances.
And what about other UCOs who hadn't had relationships speaking to new recruits? We've heard about mentors and previous UCOs saying to some of the UCOs, well, it's inevitable.
Yes.
It's inevitable.
Yes.
It will be part of your deployment. What about ensuring that those conversations were prohibited and encouraging those conversations that encouraged avoidance?
Yeah. I mean, I was happy to let the mentor scheme wither, because in this particular circumstance, I thought it was negative in its effect. The mentors were people of such a similar professional experience that they were simply passing on the collective memory. This is the way we do things, rather than providing an informed, wide experience-based opinion or view on something. They're just simply passing on what had been done before. So I was happy to let it go, and I wasn't content with the influence of former officers. So, for instance, we had a suite of offices and we had a spare office, and Bob Lambert wanted to, could I use that office for my Muslim contacts unit? No, sorry. I don't want the old regime or the old sweats, whatever, telling this lot how to go about things.
Can I ask you about the date of the prohibition? You've already addressed that at the beginning of your evidence this morning, in terms of remembering now that
Yes.
you must have given that express prohibition around September, October 2001. Was there anything that you recall now that triggered that express prohibition?
No. If there was, I've forgotten it, but I don't think there was. And it's like I'm trying to think back to the precise moment when I became suspicious about Thompson, and I just can't recall that either. So no, it wasn't an event, but it was when you are beginning to investigate someone like Thompson. This is someone again who has picked out the lifestyle he wants. Right, well, is that lifestyle going to include the obvious? And so I didn't know what the extent of the problem was in Thompson terms, never mind sexual misconduct. And so the warning had to go in. But it was not spurred on by anything else.
By the time that you came into the SDS in May 2001, and you spent those few months, 2 months, I think, shadowing HN58.
Until July, yes.
Through to July. Were you aware that Rosa had been trying to track down HN14 Jim Boyling by then?
No.
We know that on the 15th of November 2000, Rosa had visited HN14's Duff accommodation and given a note to the landlord.
Yes.
Through the
I remember
decorator.
that evidence, yeah.
Do you remember that happening at the time?
No.
That's
no.
only something you've come to learn about, is it, since?
Reading the evidence, yeah.
And that on the 12th of December 2000, she had called the SDS duty phone and the office phone, 4 calls she had made. And if we can bring up MPS 309522. At page 7, please.
Yeah.
We can see those 4 calls that
Yeah.
have been made by Rosa asking for Jim.
Yeah.
And we can see that in the first bullet point, NW, Noel War
Yeah.
answered. Again, in 2, Noel War answered. In 3, Bernie Greeny answered. And at 4, it was the duty phone.
Yeah.
And she says there, if you see Jim, tell him I'm leaving him and it's all over.
Yeah.
It was clear by that run of messages, wasn't it, that this was a girlfriend looking for Jim Boyling.
Yeah.
That had operational security issues attached with it as well, because she's calling the duty phone. How is it that was not relayed to you coming in, then taking over management of the SDS office only, 5 months later in the May?
I mean, I can't answer that. I don't know.
Can we have up MPS 748100, please? So 0748 It's a file note of communications, page 20, please. And we can see here, this is entitled Rosa as a gist. A file note of the same date, the 12th of December 2000. And this is an instruction from HN53 as to the response back office will make in the event that Rosa contacts the office again. You can see the bold bullet points as to what should be relayed to her. So HN53, the DI, who is your DI when you take over, is in full knowledge of Rosa's hunt for Jim Boyling, isn't she?
Yes.
Isn't he? And does he not make you aware of that and make you aware of the problem that sexual relationships can have and the fallout that can have, even if only in relation to the SDS operational security?
No. Well, we moved office not too long after I took over, and I've forgotten the circumstances of that, but I think that was an activist chasing someone. Did this continue? And
that's right. I think that the whole move in July or around July 2001, so while you're in office.
Oh, no. No, we moved office when I was there, and I would have taken over in July, but it wasn't the first week I was there. We moved after 9/11, because I know where I was, like everybody, at 9/11, and we were in the old office.
Okay.
What I was going to say is that in 53's defence, this may have gone on afterwards, and did it go on afterwards into mine? And when she rings during mine, he then explains to me what the situation was. I mean, do you know whether it was the same activist? Because I can't remember. I
Yes,
just know an activist had rung in, and we thought we'd better up sticks.
Yes, I think that is in relation to Rosa. I think you're right.
Right.
And I think HN14, around midsummer, so around July 2001, had told the office that the need to move offices was being thought about by that stage. It was being contemplated from July onwards, and it was something to do with him.
Right, so in that sense, I am aware then because I was aware of an activist chasing Jim Boyling.
And you were aware that it was his girlfriend,
No.
his activist girlfriend?
No.
How were you not aware of that if you're having a discussion with HM53 about that?
I'm not sure I had a discussion with him, but I can remember the arrangements. We'd better move office then, because she'll be knocking on the door next.
Did you not query why on earth she was so keen to get in touch with
No,
Jim?
no. And of course, in retrospect, she had the answer to a lot of my problems. Had I known that, I would have started off even differently. And I think, is there a systemic problem here? But then it was an activist he's chasing, and if you decide that I was in error by not asking, was she his girlfriend? Yeah, okay, I didn't ask. There is the other side to that, of course, that I could be accused of misogyny if I had considered female activists as simply sexual objects for use by the field, and that they couldn't be just as effective and diligent and active as male activists. That why should I assume because a female activist is ringing up, it's to do with sex with a man? I wouldn't do it if a male activist phoned in.
Well,
Why should I assume it was to do with the sexual thing? No, I'm just making the point that...
But I think it's more to do with the fact that she says, well, I'm leaving him. It's over. That's clearly a reference to a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, but that relates to 8-9 months before. When I'm told that Rosa has phoned in, it's not in relation to any of this. It's an extra bit on, and I am told it's an activist has rung in. Right, we'd best go then.
Do you think you should have been told, if you weren't, that this is an ex-partner or a...
I can only say that 53 wouldn't have wanted to deceive me, and that maybe he thought I was aware. I don't know.
So you can't think of any reason why he didn't tell you
No.
that obvious part of the story?
That is the point. He's such an excellent character that, no, he wouldn't have wanted to deceive me.
Do you think it's likely he did tell you and
Well, that's the
somehow
next
you've
step,
forgotten?
isn't it? But I would have started off with the knowledge, Thompson's not the first. And then Saraki. Well, Saraki was the first. Thompson was the second, because the investigations revealed it. I would have started off on a different foot, and I didn't. So if I was aware of it, I'd forgotten it pretty quickly. And
Can I bring up MPS 0749473, please? This is in relation to Mark Jenner. Page 3. We can see this is a file note from the 16th of July 2001
Yeah.
in respect of a call that Terry, Mark's cover employer, received on the 25th of June 2001. And we can see in paragraph 5 that touchy subject, Mark Jenner, is relatively relaxed about the inquiry and thinks that it might emanate from Alison, who occupied a room in his former Duff. He suggests that she is the girlfriend of Mark Metcalf. the fact that a woman who used to live with Mark Jenner is searching for him through a third party, did that give you any cause to consider that this might be another deceived woman who is searching for one of your officers? Or I understand Mark Jenner ceased his deployment in 2000, so he wasn't under your management.
Yeah. Well, in the chronology, Alison is the first, because 16th of July must have been the day after I took over.
Okay.
Because it would have been about that time with 58's retirement. So it wasn't a chronology. And that's why I asked, did this spark the move, or was it Rosa? Because if it was Rosa, well, I didn't have knowledge before then. But is this the one which caused me to agree that we should move? Or did Rosa come up again?
Yeah, so Rosa first came up, at least on the documents I've shown you, in December 2000.
Yeah.
Sorry, November.
It's 8-9 months
2000, then December 2000. And then we hear Jim Boyling in midsummer, around July, saying to the office, is this something to do with me because of Rosa, which seems to have triggered contemplation of a move.
Yeah.
Around the same time in July, we're getting a call from a third party asking on behalf of Alison where Mark Jenner is. Can I also refer you to MPS 309531, please? So this is a file note in relation to Mark Jenner again, and this is just before you, you took over in the July. What was your first start date of actually entering the office? Was it beginning of May?
For the handover, it'd be in May.
Yeah, May.
And the takeover was whatever 58's retirement date was, which is July apparently.
So this being then in May, at the end of May 2001, it's likely that you were in the office at that time. I'm not saying it there when the phone call happened, but you were there shadowing HN58 at that time. Terry, Mark's Duff employer, had called Bob Lambert to say that Alison was inquiring after Mark Jenner, and Bob Lambert then contacted the office on Friday the 28th of May to say that Terry had been in touch. Again, Alison, inquiring after him, understood that he'd gone away to Germany, and understanding a bit about his private life. So a close associate, at least, of Mark Jenner's, that's obvious. Any suspicion at all arising that this might be a woman who is deceived in a relationship looking for her partner?
No, I mean, I'm days ago come in to shadow 58, who had another 3 months to go. And we're talking about a field officer who had already left. And I don't even recall that.
I asked you earlier about Helen Dines and her search for... Helen Steele and her search for John Dines.
Yes.
I'm sorry, in relation to that slip. Any reference to Helen looking for John Dines in the context of women calling the office, trying to get in touch, looking for these UCOs that have withdrawn from the field? Any putting two and two together to raise at least a well-founded suspicion that there were sexual relationships going on in relation to these officers?
No. And again, following the evidence, I was dismayed to discover that the history of that particular relationship, given that both John Dines' name came to me for the first time in 2003-04, when Helen Steele goes to New Zealand again. That is the first. I'd never heard of John Dines.
We have heard evidence from HN 118, known as Simon Wellings.
Yeah.
And he gave his evidence to this inquiry on the 16th of March 2026. And he suggested that your prohibition was in response to rumblings amongst UCOs about something going wrong in HN16's deployment, which you've addressed. And he said, he replied yes in answer to this question. He lays down the ground rules, that's referring to you. You go to separate out, for example, in the kitchen area. You're talking about this, and your recollection is someone mentioned James Thompson travelling on a passport, with the subtext being that maybe it's because he was involved in a relationship. And 118's answer to that was yes. So at least it was 118's impression that HN16 had been away travelled on a passport to Indonesia. We know as the inquiry that was with Ellie, a woman that he had deceived into a relationship.
Yes.
And so was that something that was known about or understood to be involved with that trip by the UCOs in that plenary session?
HM53's investigation was known only to me, but we knew that Thompson would tell somebody, and that's where the information has come from. So, was it Simon Wellings, did you say? Simon Wellings' evidence there is the first I heard of the field's knowledge of it, yeah. So, if it was common knowledge in the field, I wasn't aware it was, because we didn't tell the sergeants, we didn't tell anybody.
When you were investigating HN16's trip to Indonesia, you discovered that he'd gone to Indonesia because you checked the credit card details in his passport, I think. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
So by September 2001, October 2001, you were aware that he'd gone on that trip against instruction.
Yeah.
Were any further investigations done about who he travelled with?
I'd have to look at HM53's report, which is voluminous. All the inquiries are in there. We know that, for instance, he left his phone here so that we couldn't track that abroad. But we also knew I was going to go with him as cover officer because I was already suspicious. I just couldn't put my finger on it, but all right, I'll go with him. 9/11, neither of us is going. And I remember saying to HM53, he'll go anyway. And that's not news to HM53. He was of the same suspicion.
So did you? So you predicted that?
Yeah.
And did you?
So we were ready to inquire on him when he went.
And when his passport, went through border control, was there any sense that you could identify who he was travelling with? And if he was travelling with a young woman, that would flag further concerns?
No. I mean, the mechanics and the detail of 53's investigation, I don't hold in my head. But I know it was comprehensive, but it was retrospective. We couldn't follow him where he was because his phone was here, and doing contemporaneous checks of passport transactions just wasn't possible.
When you say it was comprehensive, failure to identify the fact that he was travelling with a young woman that he was in a sexual relationship with as
Yes.
James Straven, would that seem to be a significant gap in that investigation?
Not a gap in the investigation, a gap in the results of what was available to us in order to track him. I mean, if there was a means of discovering that at the time, my God, we would have taken it.
Is there a chance that, in fact, it was known that he was travelling with another woman, but that just didn't seem to be an issue at the time? Nobody cared about that?
No. No, if I'd known precisely at what time he was going, and he was going with another woman on a Duff passport, I'd have stopped him at the gate, or at least the branch officers at the airport would have stopped him. But we didn't have that advanced knowledge. We didn't know what his flight details were because he'd bought his own tickets. So it was retrospective, but as contemporaneous as we could make it. And 53, for that period of time, did just virtually nothing else but that investigation.
In the context of knowing about, well, given that we know Rosa has been calling,
Yeah.
and Alison has been calling, and we know that Helen Steele has been searching as well.
No.
You're saying you didn't know.
No.
Was there no cumulative marshalling of this sort of evidence? Was there no institutional knowledge where HM53, for instance, just says, my goodness, we're in real difficulty here, we've got some serious concerns, even if it was only in relation to the operational security of the SDS? Was that nothing that was discussed?
I understand your question.
That wasn't discussed?
Yeah. We didn't know who he was travelling with. We didn't know he was travelling with another woman. And as I say, if we had and when, we'd have stopped him at the gate. Him travelling in a false passport, that's enough to convict him, sort of thing. So we didn't know that. I didn't know about, I'd never heard of John Dines at that time. So, no, he certainly wasn't. And it certainly wasn't, forget the women, just let him get on with it. It's exactly the opposite. If we could have found more ammunition to nail him to the floorboards, we would have done. But, you know.
Was the uprooting of the SDS offices and moving the SDS offices and your direct prohibition on sexual relationships a direct consequence of the operational threat of at least 3 women seeking other officers and HN16 going abroad in the way that he did with another woman? Was that the motivation for you giving your direction?
No, my threat was precipitated by the Thompson investigation. If he's adopting this lifestyle, then that could well be part of it. Though we hadn't yet established at that point that he was in an inappropriate relationship. If I remember the detail correctly, I think that came from phone billing records. But I couldn't then sit on a preference not to give the warning just yet, because by giving the warning, I'm putting them on notice. I would have liked to have completed the investigation on Thompson, and then during that time, we could say, is there anything else coming up that we need to look at? But I didn't have that time. So it was precipitated by it, but it wasn't caused by it, by the Thompson investigation. In relation to the other women, there was no such link.
And the move of office? When do you say that was? I think you did mention it, but...
I can't remember. We were in the old office, as I say, at 9/11. I can't honestly remember when we moved.
Was it before the end of 2001?
I don't know. I just can't remember.
And what precipitated that?
That was an activist calling in.
Okay, so that...
Was it for Jim Boiling? But when that was, I don't know.
But your evidence is there's no link between having to move office because either Rosa and or Alison was looking for a UCO and your direction to give your direction to the UCOs to stop having sexual relationships or not to have sexual relationships. There's no link between the two.
No, I don't know. It was just purely, in my sense, an activist, a female activist. Nothing, as far as I could see it, nothing. The gender had nothing to do with it. As I say, I regarded her as an activist, not as a sexual object for one of the field.
Is it more than just a coincidence, and in fact, your direction was precipitated by an understanding by back office that relationships were going on, and this was a security
nothing
threat?
to do with it. Nothing to do with it. It was precipitated by the Thompson thing. Solely that. Yet we hadn't got to the point in the Thompson thing where we established the relationship with women.
If it was purely in relation to Thompson, who is going off on travels, why was the direction not, you must not undertake travel against our instruction? Why was your direction related to sexual relationships?
Because the former was obvious. If you're instructed, you're a police officer, you don't do it. You obey orders. The second one was because that is the lifestyle change that Thompson could well be making. And of course he was.
Sorry, what
it was
do you
the
mean by that?
lifestyle change into, as part of this alter ego lifestyle, I shall be conducting illicit relationships with women. And he might not. But it was the most obvious thing. It's not confined to policing, is it? This is where, when people say, well, it happens everywhere, it does happen everywhere, so you'd best do something about it happening here.
So that was a real suspicion you had at the time of HN16?
I had a suspicion that it would be a component of his alternative lifestyle, because it was a lifestyle. He was really a film's location person. He wasn't an SDS officer. He'd adopted that fully. We were only just late catching on to that. And so we hadn't yet discovered the elements which were the women. So I'd better cover that in relation to anyone else. If there had been suspicions about anyone else, then I would have mounted investigations into them as individuals, just as with Thompson.
And when HN 104 disclosed that he was in a relationship, did you mount any investigation with him?
No.
In relation to Lindsay? Why not?
Because I was duped. Because I was quite pleased, mug that I am, that my instruction had had some effect. That 4 days after the instruction was given, he's coming to me and putting his hands up. I had no reason at that time to believe, as I would now if I were going to start the job again with all this knowledge behind me, I had no reason to believe that he was betraying the trust that I had in him. And that is, again, another reason why I took a fortnight to decide whether I wanted the job. It was because the key element was trust.
Do you wish now that you'd have had all that institutional knowledge behind you? The Mike Chitties, the Scotts,
yes.
The Dineses, would that have changed your view of what was going on at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd have left and got a milk round.
And what steps did you take when HN 104 told you about his relationship with Lindsay to ensure that that relationship did finish?
I couldn't.
You didn't take any steps at all?
No, I couldn't.
What do you mean you couldn't?
How could I intrude into her life to establish that what Carla was saying was the truth?
Do you think that any act that you took to intrude in her life would be way below the intrusion that Carlo Saracchi had already made into her life?
Yes, but dropping one bomb on a person is less than dropping 100 bombs on them, but you're still dropping a bomb on them.
Could it be that you looked at his activity without intruding on Lindsay's?
That's where the difficulty was.
personal life.
You will recall from the outcome of, well, not the outcome, before the outcome of the Thompson investigation, was we put in much more intrusive supervision of them in terms of bank accounts and bills and everything, receipts for everything.
Is that something you could have done in relation to other UCOs? The 10 you say that you were managing?
Those elements of intrusive supervision. Well, it applied to everybody.
Okay.
Everyone had to bring in their bank statements every month, and we kept the passports in an office, a cabinet, so you couldn't travel on your own. You had to apply to us. Everything was kept with us where it could be, and everything was accounted for as much as it could be. But at this point, I do wish I had all the knowledge I've got now about the sexual misconduct. My God, yes.
Sir, I note the time.
We'll have the usual 15-minute break in a moment. Could I just ask you one question arising out of the topic that's been discussed?
Yeah.
Your recollection now is that it was in September 2001 that you told the undercover officers that sexual relationships in their undercover identity were wholly prohibited and would lead to their removal from the unit.
Yes, sir. In terms of, it was the early stages of the Thompson investigation, and that's how I'm dating it.
But the telephone investigation of Thompson, which revealed 3 women recipients, didn't take place until the following year.
That's what I'm saying. We didn't have that information.
Oh.
And the answer to your next question is yes, we should have done it sooner.
That wasn't going to be my next question. I'm simply trying to put a date on things and to see how it ties in. But it isn't the discovery by telephone records of Thompson's interaction with 3 women that prompted this.
Exactly right.
It was before that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Understood. In which case, one possible misconception from which I might have laboured is removed. Thank you. 15 minutes. Yes.
Could I have up on screen, please, MPS 0719571. It's behind tab B87. Mr. Dell, you addressed this document at paragraph 289B of your witness statement, and essentially it's about Magenta Triangle, HN16 James Thompson's code name. It's actually initialed by you. It's a file note of the 12th of October 2001. This wasn't circulated, this document. In paragraph 1 here, we can see that there's reference to CAN. By the 12th of October 2001, were you aware that in fact HN16 had not been on annual leave in CAN?
No.
Were you aware, so you weren't aware by the 12th of October that he had been to Indonesia?
I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, I was aware that he'd not been in Cannes, yeah.
Okay, so he hadn't been in Cannes, he'd been evacuated, he'd been to Indonesia to see L4 ostensibly.
Of course, yeah.
And the dates of that visit were the 26th of September 2001 to the 5th of October 2001, so we understand.
Okay.
Does that help you with when your prohibition on sexual relationships was? Is it right to say that you spoke to the plenary group at the safe house after he had returned from Indonesia?
It suggests it was after the 12th of October.
Okay. And is it right, do you recall that the reason you knew he wasn't in Cannes at the time was because of a credit card use in Singapore?
Yes.
And that was for hotel bills and a laptop, I think it was, an electrical item that he
Raffles
bought.
Hotel, yeah.
Raffles Hotel, was it?
Yeah.
And so your understanding was that he'd been out to Indonesia, but he'd spent time in Singapore?
Yes.
And was there any sense that that was a hotel bill for two people?
I can't remember without seeing 53's report.
Would it have been relatively easy to identify whether that was for two people or one person?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the bill. If the bill's in my name for my family on holiday, it's just one person, or sometimes it's two. I accept what you're saying. If it did show two people, then yes, it would be added information for us.
Were any attempts made to call up the hotel to find out who stayed in the room at those particular dates? Is that something you could have done as a special branch?
I don't think so. I don't know.
But those attempts weren't made. Is it right to say, or is it HM53 who conducted the investigation? So
yeah, I mean, you will see him next week. Honestly, I don't know. I take responsibility for your suggestion. If it wasn't, I should have done that. Yes, I accept that. But I don't know whether it was done.
Do you recall if there was any discussion around that issue at the time?
No, I can't remember.
As to whether he was travelling to Singapore on his own or whether he was in the company of anybody else?
I just can't remember. I don't know.
Just while we're on this document, this isn't necessarily to do with his trip to Indonesia, but it's to do with the suggestion that L4 would want to do harm to L5. I'll give you a moment to have a look at this.
As in Operation Lime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in particular, I want to draw your attention to the second paragraph, which talks about the lawyer and the lawyer's advice and whether you would have flagged that as LPP.
Well, it's self-evident it is, but it's for intelligence purposes. As long as we don't use it in any proceedings, it's legitimate for it to be there. The report can be used, but it mustn't be used in proceedings, as I understand it.
And in terms of the wish to do harm to L5, was there any concern that you had about James Thompson being involved in any plan to cause harm? Any concern about conspiracy?
Oh, there would...
And being involved, participating in crime of
Yes.
a very serious nature?
There would have been, but we just didn't believe a word of it anyway.
So already at that stage, you didn't believe what
No.
he was talking about?
As I said, that's why I was going to go with him. What the heck I could have done, I've no idea.
Was it recognised by you at that stage that had there been some kind of prosecution resulting out of this, you would have had to have disclosed the involvement of a UCO
Yes.
in this sort of criminal offence?
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
So for obvious reasons, you tell James Thompson not to be involved in such,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
an incident.
I mean, that was just another red line, which was obviously a red line, but it was articulated ad nauseum.
Over the page, we can see that you've signed it off with your initials, it's been distributed to the other managers in the back office, and copy on private file. Does that mean that it wasn't circulated any more widely?
Yes, that would be Thompson's file.
And in what circumstances were file notes, as opposed to intelligence reports, circulated?
File notes weren't. It's just as it said, for the file. In fact, you can see on that one this copy to be destroyed, which was the hard copy, obviously.
So this incident, this is what triggered HM53's in-depth investigation into James Thompson's deployment, is that right?
Yes.
You at paragraph 308A of your witness statement, it's at page 216, you talk about this being evidence that he was abusing the props of his cover identity. You see it's subparagraph A.
Yeah.
And that was in relation to his unauthorised trip to Indonesia.
Yeah.
Moving over the page to subparagraph D, again, there's this sense that it's a key requirement for a UCO to honour the trust being placed in them. And you've noticed, you've already given evidence that an awful lot of trust was placed in these officers, given the nature of the intrusive policing tactic that they were engaged in.
Yes.
Recognising that there's a lot of trust, you do say that, of course, if that's not honoured, then all sorts can go wrong.
Yes.
Given that there's a clear indication here that things have gone wrong, at that stage, were you concerned that there might be things going wrong in other deployments and you had to put in much more intrusive
Yes.
supervision on all officers?
Yes, because if they were hand-picked, then I could just blame myself, couldn't I? But if you make do with what you've got, and I'm only talking about two people, then, yeah, the pivot of the whole thing, trust, becomes the weakness.
And subparagraph E, you talk about the limits of the intrusive supervision you can put in place, and you've touched on that already in your evidence today.
Yeah.
But looking at bank statements, potentially telephone statements, by this stage everybody had a mobile phone, is that right?
Yes.
And so you could look at mobile phones and
Yes.
identify patterns of who people were contacting and
Yes.
that sort of thing. What
That
about...
that would prove to be a short-term thing, because the first person you confront with their phone bills, and that's it, because everybody else will know about that, and they're just going to burn a phone. So that's limited. Phone billing is good for investigations, but for monitoring, well, you can only use it once, as I say.
And you mentioned surveillance teams didn't have the resources to do this.
No.
And it would have been far too intrusive.
Yes, and I would have to get an external surveillance team. That's just it.
And that wasn't something that was open to you
No.
because of cost, or what
The
was the reason?
cost, again, revealing the nature of the tasking. Don't forget, I trusted all my sergeants implicitly, but just as a reflex action, they didn't need to know, so we didn't even tell them. And as I say, we see it with Stephen Beales, excellent people.
Not discussing it with your sergeants, was that an omission in the sense that your sergeants might have had more parts of the jigsaw that could paint a wider picture as to what was going on?
No, it was because this investigation was very specific. It was into the granular detail, if you like, of Thompson. And they wouldn't have had that knowledge. If they had picked up that he was just a film location producer, really, and that, they would have told me. Because don't forget, the office itself had renewed, and Steve Beales, HN9, HN30, Ron Gilbertson, all came with me or after me. So
Was HN49 Ron Gilbertson particularly close to HN16, and for that reason he was excluded from any involvement in the investigation? You don't think he could have provided more detail as to what was going on in his operation?
I didn't know he was close to him. Do you have evidence he was?
I'm just trying to find the reference, actually. But I think it's on his own evidence. He says he was excluded from the operation because he was close to Thompson.
Well, no,
But
everyone
I can
was.
find that reference for you.
Right, everyone was excluded.
And in what ways do you say that surveillance would have been, had you been able to afford it, too intrusive?
If you are going to do something like that, you've got to go the whole hog, and you've got to get external surveillance teams in. You can't mess about and expect, oh yes, they'll do the deployment and that'll be the end of it. There's always the possibility that there's a close friend of his on the surveillance team, and I don't wish to impugn them at all. But whatever unit it is, it's extremely difficult, as you obviously appreciate, to investigate someone internally. It's...
MPS 07196551, please. Behind tab B92. This is a file note authored by you on the 14th of November 2001 in relation to DS Thompson. And it relates to a meeting on the 20th of November where you would have a meeting with Detective Chief Superintendent Black at South. Was that the safe house? South?
No, that was the main office.
Okay. The main office. And will confront DS Thompson with their knowledge of his presence under covert identity in the Far East in early October. Detective Chief Superintendent Colin Black, he was engaged in the investigation, was he as well? He was kept updated.
Yes, he was not engaged in it. He was shown the final thing, and he was briefed on it during it, of course.
We can see paragraph 6 that the inquiries established that on the 5th of October, Thompson had used his credit card in Singapore to settle a hotel bill and to buy an item from an electrical goods shop, and that's what I was referring to in relation to the laptop.
Which he then brought to one of the plenary session meetings and showed it off, yes.
Page 2, please. Paragraph 2. In terms of the exit strategy, now we can see the last part of that paragraph says that you've discussed this with DI HM53 and DS Greeny, and you were content that DS Thompson may properly close his operation by the 27th of January. So a very short timeline for withdrawal, and he was to be out
Yes.
of operation. And penultimate paragraph here, he cannot be recommended to any outside body. And so clearly, was it your view that this was not a person to be recommended to others, and you didn't want him operating under your watch
Yes.
anymore? We can see from a minute sheet behind MPS 0748359, behind tab B93, that this, I think this is a note by Pierce. Can we just go over the page as well, please? In fact, that's a note, a handwritten note by Colin Black.
Yeah.
And we can see that he has sent this up to Commander SB to see. And then I think that's Commander Pierce's reaction that we see handwritten on page 2. If we can go to page 3, please, just to show the name at the bottom of that manuscript entry. Sorry, no, that's
Eric McLaughlin.
yeah, McLaughlin's note. Commander Pierce, he was sent this file to see. What was his reaction to it? Do you recall having any correspondence or discussion with Commander Pierce?
I can't remember, no. I don't know what his reaction was. I wonder if he was even there, because Colin Black's signing himself acting commander at some point during this time.
The sense that we get from this minute sheet, though, is that by November 2001, everybody is aware of the activities of HN16,
Yeah.
and that he's fully under investigation.
Yes, it seems so, yeah.
What we can see from McLaughlin's note at the bottom of page 2,
Yeah.
where it says, please let me have something along these lines summarising the efforts of all field officers on a monthly basis. I'm not only interested in the frequency, but also the nature of reporting, for which reason the intelligence requirement code and level should be identified alongside each item. Can you recall having that directive and sending in some kind of statistical analysis of what your officers were reporting on and the nature of that reporting?
I can't remember doing that, and I was a bit bemused when I saw that minute from Eric. It's as if we were unaware that Thompson had been misbehaving when we'd just written a report to that effect.
I think this is relating to the efforts of all field officers, so all of your officers in the SDS as well.
But the implication is that we're not doing that. And, well, how many per month do you want us to throw out? I was a bit bemused by that. And what I did, I can't remember. But why do you want to do my job?
Was this an attempt by McLaughlin to have some kind of oversight as to what was going on in the SDS, what type of reports were coming in and at what frequency, in order to assess whether this was, whether everybody was on the scam or whether it was a one-off in HN16?
Perfectly legitimate ambition, but, well, then why don't you do it right from the beginning? At this point, it's as if you've got to get a grip. Well, we are getting a grip. And I had great regard for Eric. That's why I'm bemused by the minute. What would you do that I wouldn't do? I mean, given the very recent attempts by the Met, by scrapping 3 ranks to compress the chain of command so that people couldn't dodge responsibility by simply bumping it up the chain. Oh, I don't know, you better have a look at it. And Eric is now going the other way. You'd only be doing my job.
So you don't think that you actually complied with that request?
I don't know. I don't know.
Superintendent?
53 has a filing cabinet memory. He'll remember, I would think, but I don't.
At the bottom of page 3, we can see that the extraction deadline was delayed. So given that the 27th of the 1st was too soon, it was pushed back to the 7th of April 2002 as being more practicable. Can you recall that?
I can recall the actual discussion over it, and obviously I was in favour of the earlier extraction. But it wasn't to be.
But for operational reasons, was it seen that he needs to go through the process of withdrawing?
I thought in operational terms, his operation had been a scam for ages. There was no threat to him. And it was an administrative date, i.e. as soon as we can. But he persuaded people that he needed more time.
Do you think that he was persuading McLaughlin or even Pearce? Was he talking to Pearce? Do you think?
I don't know,
Black?
Honestly. I don't have any recollection of him speaking to Roger Pearce.
Can we look at, please, MPS 0719701? This wasn't a document that was in your bundle, Mr. Dell, but it's in relation to his extraction now.
Yeah.
Page 2, please. By subparagraph C, we can see a note in relation to Wendy, and it's in particular about her house purchase. We understand that Wendy, when she knew Thompson, had not long lost her mum, and as a young woman she was looking to buy a house. And there's a suggestion that there were attempts to disrupt that house purchase because the house that she wanted to buy was in the vicinity of Thompson's ex-wife and children.
Yeah.
Do you recall that?
Yeah, yes, I'm not sure when I recalled it from because I've read this before. What is the date of this, please?
I'm not sure I have the date. It might be in the index. I don't think the date's on... If we go to the very bottom of the page, I don't think the date's on the face of the document, unfortunately.
No date on it. I mean, what I'm asking is this written before he's rumbled or is it after?
We're looking for the date, but I think it's after he's rumbled, and it's a deep dive into his...
Right. That's fine if that's the answer, yeah.
Into his operation. We've got a date on the index of the 19th of the 10th, 2001. That's pulled from the metadata. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you would have been aware of this document?
Yes.
Mid-October?
Yes, and I have read it several times. That's why I couldn't discern when I'd...
And what were the attempts that were made to disrupt the house purchase?
I took that when I was reading his evidence that he had tried to disrupt the purchase. I can't remember why, what reason he gave.
Do you recall how he tried to do that?
No.
Do you recall there being any suspicion at that time that there were young women that he was closely involved with and that there might be something more going on with these women?
No, this is 2 days before that 21st of October memo which you showed before, where I used that as a benchmark to say, well, my warning must have come after the 21st of October. So this looks like it's developing at this time, but detail of it, I don't think so at that time.
Can we have MPS 0719806, please? This is a file note of the 29th of May 2002 now by HM53. And we can see towards the top that HM53 met with HN1 to discuss James Thompson's situation. And we can see from paragraph 4 that MT, Magenta Triangle, told HM1 that he believed that most of the current suspicions about his operation stemmed from SDS management disapproval of field officers becoming involved in romantic relationships during the course of their operation.
So that gives you the latest date about which my warning could have been issued, even though I know it was much before that. But that's the latest date because he's aware of it there.
Okay. And so...
In relation to Saraki thing, the Saraki evidence, that corroborates it.
Okay. So by saying that, are you suggesting then that HN16, Thompson, is only saying you have suspicions about disapproval of officers having romantic relationships because of what you've said?
That's how I read it, yeah.
Or is this because HN16 knows he's been in romantic relationships, he's had sexual relationships undercover, and he thinks you're onto him?
I think the two go together, isn't it? He's implicitly admitting that he's in romantic relationships.
And given that he's admitting that, and this is on a file note in 2002, is it right to infer that at least DI HM53 knew that he must have been in a sexual relationship, at least one?
Well, by this time, 53 has finished his report. And yes, that would be in there.
Because 53's identified the phone
Yes.
traffic, hasn't he, with at least 3 women.
Yes, and not just 53, but I would be aware. Yeah.
So by the 29th of May 2002, you and DIHN 53 are aware that HN16 is effectively admitting to having had sexual relationships undercover.
Yeah, it's a tacit admission, but I think 53 makes reference somewhere to the fact that we didn't have enough to nail him down for disciplinary. And I can't remember why we didn't have at that point. And given the fact that Thompson was totally uncooperative.
Does it also suggest to you that HN16 is implying that a number of field officers were in romantic relationships during the course of their operation, given that it's written in the plural?
Sorry. Yes. So I just checked that. No. I read that as one must not. He's written it in plural, field officers. That's just my reading of it.
And whilst HN53 reassured HN1 that the suspicion about sexual relationships did not form part of any part of the suspicions about his operation, was that your understanding, or did
Yes.
you think actually these suspicions are going to be further investigated?
No, they went the court suspicions, they went the basis of our suspicion that his operation was a sham. That they were uncovered during that investigation, I see as a separate point. That wasn't the starting point, a suspicion which led us to investigate him further. It came out of the investigation, and I think 53 says that we didn't have enough at that time for disciplinary action. On that score, for the women, we had plenty on the credit cards and the other such things.
Was there any further investigation about the relationships that you suspected he had with the 2 women that he had a lot of phone traffic with?
No. As I remember it, it was bundled together in certainly my mind anyway, and I think our minds, that it was part of the whole misconduct. And that consideration would then be given, right, where do we go rediscipline? Which parts do we pick up? What can we identify as amenable to disciplinary action?
Was that not one of them now?
Yes, that would have been, and that would have been one of them. But at that point, it would have been to collect everything and present.
The inquiry understands that there was no further investigation into the suspected relationships he had with the 2 women identified, and that no disciplinary action was taken in relation to those sexual relationships he had.
Yes.
Why was that?
Well, the decision was taken not to discipline him.
Who took that decision not to discipline him in relation to the sexual relationships?
Well, it was in relation to the whole file.
Whose decision was it to focus upon one element of the investigation?
No, it wasn't focusing on it. Here's the evidence for consideration by solicitors, what possible charges there are, but we didn't get that far. The decision was taken for operational reasons not to prosecute him either discipline-wise or criminal. And so no aspect of it was investigated. It wasn't singling out the women. It was that the whole lot wasn't proceeded with.
And whose decision was that?
I don't know whether that would have been Colin Black's or ultimately Roger Pierce's, but it would have been at that level.
Part of the investigation was in relation to the creation of a separate identity under the name of Kevin Crossland.
Yes.
A file note of the 4th of April 2002 is behind tab B119, MPS 0719747. And this is a meeting on the 3rd of April 2002 with you, HN16, HN53 and yourself to discuss outstanding items relating to his operation.
Yes.
And we can see at the foot of that page, you told MT, magenta triangle, that if he persisted in offering the view that Crossland was created to ease his covert entry into the USA, following your refusal, but weeks ago, to allow MT to be in the USA under his operational cover identity and unsupervised, MD would be compelled to report that MT was lying.
Yeah.
And was it your understanding that, in fact, he'd created the false identity under that name of Crossland
yes.
about 2 years prior to that?
Yes. If not for operational reasons, it was for personal gain.
Given that was for personal gain, when it came to be that the National Crime Service was looking at, the National Crime Squad, the NCS, was looking at Operation Wisdom and investigating the use of deceased children's identities for criminal purposes.
Yeah.
Why was it that you chose to speak with the NCS to prevent HN16 being prosecuted?
I don't remember doing it, but obviously it looks like I did. Can you help me with documentary evidence? Because I don't even remember doing that.
Sorry, bear with me one moment.
I certainly wasn't embarking on a course of keeping him out of trouble.
MPS 0719695, please. In fact, I think it's HN53 who met with the DI of the NCS on the 17th of April 2002.
Right.
Regarding that operation to investigate the use of deceased children's identities.
Yes. And the answer to that is it's not to protect Thompson, it's to protect you've heard it many times, operational security.
And was it the case that operational security came above all other considerations?
De facto, yes.
Did you have any consideration at the time of the interests of the family of Kevin Crossland to know the truth about the appropriation of their child's identity and to have justice seen to be done by HN16 being prosecuted for the misuse of their child's identity?
I didn't appreciate that at the time.
Why was that?
I can't explain why I failed to appreciate it. I didn't. I do now.
is it the sense that you had that nobody in the SDS really took any took into consideration the ethics of such a method of creating an identity?
It was a sin of omission, not commission. It wasn't a deliberate callousness.
Do you think now in hindsight that in fact HN16 should have been referred to Operation Wisdom for investigation and prosecution for his unsanctioned appropriation of Kevin Crossland's identity?
I don't see how you can ask that question without asking, should he be referred for all of the matters in the 53 report? Would I pick that out as an exception? I would have to balance it against the interests of the Crossland family. And I mean, those are the difficult decisions you have to make. Miscreants like him put you in this position where you have an impossible decision to make. And whose side would I rather be on, the Crosslands or Thompson? It should be obvious by now.
And does that equally apply to the women deceived by not only HN16 but
Yes.
the other officers as well?
Yes.
That in fact, when it was identified that those officers had deceived and abused women in the course of their operation, those women should have been told the truth as to what was happening.
Yes.
As opposed to protecting the operation.
Yes. And even though we didn't prosecute, but if we didn't prosecute, I was going to say we should have still told the women, but the operational security issues there are great. And another impossible decision. I'm trying to keep calm because each time I consider the Thompson case, I get extraordinarily angry about not just his behaviour, but about the positions he was putting his work colleagues in. And that includes me and people like Colin Black, who are making decisions which imperil our employment, pension and re-employment possibilities. He is forcing us to make this, and that's why I get angry. That doesn't answer the question of should we have favoured the women, should we have favoured the Crossland family. I have to say, I have to go with the operational security.
Is it right that actually the women were known about, but it was hushed up, not spoken about, because operational security came first?
No, they weren't. They were revealed during the investigation, but they weren't known about previously. And again, it was for operational security, not for protecting individuals. By taking that stance, we put ourselves in grave peril. And that's why I'm so angry with Thompson. And his attitude, his failure to put his hands up and give us the truth. And the compromise, I said it to the effect that if you work with us, we will do the best we can in the circumstances. But that would have meant discipline rather than criminal proceedings. He would still have suffered. But you're still left with the operational security aspects of telling the women, and I would have to go with that. An impossible decision, but I've got to make it, and that's the one I'd make.
And that doesn't just relate to who we now know, Sarah and Ellie, who were deceived by HN16, but that would apply to the other women, would it, in relation to the other officers under your management?
It's a principle, and a principle failure as well.
MPS 0719722, please, behind tab B133. This is actually HM53's report that we've been talking about, dated the 5th of July 2002. Do you recall reading this, or have you managed to refresh your memory about it? Page 10 to 11, then, please. If we can have both pages up on screen. We can see these are the calls. This is the call analysis that identified that it appears there were reasons to suspect that HM15 was in a relationship with Sarah and Ellie at different stages of his deployment. And we can see at paragraph 4.3 of page 12. The summary of action required. A suspicion that there may have been sexual relationships with Ellie, Wendy and Sarah. We know that there wasn't a sexual relationship with Wendy, just a close friendship or deceitful friendship. But there was sexual relationships with Ellie and Sarah, and the one with Ellie continued long after his deployment had ceased. It recommends investigation into that, and I've already asked you why that investigation wasn't conducted.
No, I'm not sure whether the investigation wasn't conducted, but I'm sure that action wasn't taken as a consequence of it, either in respect of Thompson or in the women themselves. I just can't remember how far we took it.
Do you ever recall then coming to the clear conclusion that in fact he had been having sex undercover?
It seems so, yes.
You'd come to that conclusion?
Yeah.
And did you relay that quite clearly to your superior managers?
I don't remember making it a specific topic of conversation. I might have done, but I don't remember.
Can we have, please, on screen MPS 0722289? This is in relation to the outcome of the investigations, and I think we can see on page 11, please, if we can have page 11 and 12 up on screen. We can see that this is a report as to the outcome, authored by Colin Black, Chief Superintendent, on the 19th of September 2002, and at the penultimate paragraph on page 11, there is no doubt that the officer has behaved in an appalling manner, endangering his own operation and the very existence of the SDS. And it's clear that he entered into relationships in the course of his work which are inappropriate. The final paragraph says that his operation should stop forthwith, and his vetting status will be reduced and reviewed, and that for now he will work under close supervision on A Squad. And that he has come very close to central discipline and criminal investigations, and that if it were not for the secret nature of the operation, and the need to protect his colleagues, he would be long gone. The actual disciplinary action against D.S. Thompson was minimal, wasn't it?
Yes.
Not proportionate to the type of behaviour he had exhibited.
I agree.
Can we take that down, please? Because I think there's one bit that I want to refer you to as well. What was that? Sorry. And this was obviously sent up to Pierce, this report. So Pierce was informed about the outcome of this investigation.
Yeah.
And what was the sense of what was the sense in the SDS as to the outcome of this? I can see from your evidence that you were not happy with the outcome.
No. I'm not sure it was discussed generally in the SDS. I'm not sure the field were fully aware of the extent of the investigation, and I wasn't party to their discussions. 53 and I believed that he should have been disciplined. But I understand totally Colin Black's position, where again he has to decide between that and operational security. My opinion was reinforced at the time by the visceral loathing I had for Thompson, and so that, I'm sure, didn't colour my view, but it reinforced it. And if I'd been in Colin Black's position, I would have probably charged him. But that would have been the wrong decision. Colin Black was right with his decision. And I was letting my anger get ahead of me. He was right that, do we sacrifice all this for the behaviour of somebody who shouldn't even be in the branch, never mind reposted?
The fact that no steps were taken in relation to the people injured by his behaviour meant that, I'm thinking in particular Ellie, who was the woman that he deceived into a relationship from early 2001 to 2002 and carried that on to 2018.
Yes.
She continued to be abused by Thompson in a deceitful way.
Yes.
Manipulated by him.
Yes.
And we've heard evidence from her that it's had a really significant impact on her life.
And we could have prevented that.
Do you accept that
Yes.
could have been prevented had other steps been taken?
Yes.
And
that's my fault as much as anybody's. I'm not sticking it up the chain to Colin Black. Yes, we could. And you see it with the benefit of hindsight. And you have, oh gosh, that sounds like every public sector employee, but you do learn. It, unfortunately, too late for people like Ellie.
did you raise your concerns about the failure to discipline Thompson with any of your senior managers? Did you directly confront Colin Black or Pierce at all about the outcome?
Immediately after the interview with him, I did so. And Colin Black quite rightly said, "What do you want, SO1 crawling all over this?" The Serious Organised Crime Squad, which it was then, would have investigated it. And as I say, there's no loss in pride in saying that he was right. Even though he's not right, we should have disciplined him with that impossible decision again. That's the decision I should have taken at the time, should have taken had I been him.
And had a criminal investigation been taken place into the operation, would that have been a wider investigation into the SDS, do you think?
Exactly. Well, that's the point. As Colin was saying, the whole thing will blow up, and I knew that. I knew that.
And by that, would the consequence have been that other victims of the SDS operation will also have been saved in a way? It's the wrong word to use, but the behaviour towards them would have been prevented.
Which wasn't a consideration of mine at the time because I didn't know about them. But yes, had I known about them, then that would have been, no, we've just got to wrap this up. There's too much damage here. But I didn't know that at the time.
Is it fair to say that by this time, towards the end of 2002, though, there was enough information within SDS that had there been proper discussions about the issues that were plain for all to see, that it should have, steps should have been taken to prevent any furtherance of the operations?
For where I sit, the evidence from in 2002, looking backwards, is clear. But I didn't have it at the time. And I'm very clear about it. If I had the evidence, it would have been totally different. But I didn't.
Should you have had it at the time? Again, the environment in which you're operating is in very much like silos. Back to my earlier thing about leaving B Squad and then three days later, you're not privy to what they're doing. People didn't tell people what it was about. As I said, I had to Google Mike Chitty to find out what it was about. And that was a month ago, 6 weeks ago. So even within the SDS operation itself, there wasn't information being discussed between managers who were responsible for the operations?
No, not of that type.
Were you then hampered in your ability to actually manage properly?
Ex post, yes. But at the time, the others were behaving as we all behaved in relation to information and intelligence. That people who, I know it sounds corny, but needed to know. Now, in retrospect, I needed to know, but the patterns weren't as obvious as they are today.
So I note the time. I'm about to move on to a different topic.
Then we will break, but I'm afraid after I've returned to a topic that I asked you about before, the dates on which you told HN 104, Carlo Siraci, and others that they must not engage in sexual relationships, and when Carlo Siraci came back and told you
Yes.
that he had.
Yes.
Can I just put to you some dates which may assist with this?
Right.
By the 20th of October, when you'd had a meeting directing Thompson to terminate his deployment at the end of January.
Yes.
You knew that he had lied about his trip to Indonesia.
Yes.
He had not gone to Cannes,
Yes.
and you knew because his credit card had been debited in Singapore.
Yes.
Your memory is that it was that or something like that that prompted you to say to your officers, you must not engage in sexual relationships or you will be off the squad.
It was at least after that date. That's what I deduce.
After that date,
yes.
Fine. Now, and 2 days after you said that, Sorachi came back to you and said he had had a relationship.
Yes.
We know from documents that Carlo Sorachi went to Venice between the 17th and 19th of December 2001, and that was
a trip with Lindsay.
A trip with Lindsay. We know also that Sergeant Beals went to Verona to act as his cover officer.
Yeah.
Thinking about it now, was it before or after that trip to Venice that you spoke to the officers and he confessed about Lindsay?
I don't know, but there's nothing in the trip to Venice which heightened my suspicions. I didn't have any suspicions about Carlo. I don't know whether it was before he went or after that.
But it would be a pretty barefaced bit of cheek for him to confess that he'd been involved with an activist, with someone who wasn't an activist.
Yes.
And then within a week or two thereafter, going off to Venice with a cover officer from the unit.
Yes. And I would like to pin it down because it would nail him down even more. But I can't honestly say when it was, in terms of days in October, November, whether it's before Venice or after. But it was very early in the Thompson investigation. And the Thompson investigation itself began, during his trip to Indonesia. So it's that time period, but I can't be specific. Again, 53 might have it at his fingertips.
He'll be asked, but you can't say one way or another whether, in effect, Carlo Sorachi told you a really barefaced bit of cheek, or he had been to Venice before you told him, the officers generally, and before he confessed.
I can't say. No.
Okay. With apologies for revisiting that topic, we will resume again at 10 tomorrow.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.